Our main passage today is Matthew 11:28. I had somebody stop me just an hour ago talking about how excited they were to hear a message on this because this was their life verse, and it is a verse that I've always known, I've always had in the forefront of my mind, but it's something I really wanted to study and lean into because my wife said, "Hey, I've got a good idea for a message for you." I was like, that's all I need. That's confirmation right there. Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest." This morning, I'm speaking to an exhausted group of people. You know, I don't think I'm projecting that. I am exhausted as well. But I feel like if I'm examining the culture and I'm being honest with the one that we find ourselves in, I see a culture that engages in redlining. You know, they've always got the rev limiter to the max. That's to increase profits, to increase experiences. Whatever it is, let's go, 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 go. And this one, I'm speaking this one to myself. Y'all can identify with it if you want. But we are over-caffeinated and overextended. We are over-caffeinated and overextended. That's not the life we were made to live. You know, it's not the life we were commanded to live. In Hebrews, we are told to run our race with endurance, and that insinuates that we have the ability to run our race and to run it well. To run it, not just stumbling across the finish line, but to make it. To run our race with endurance means that we finish in stride. I don't mean to imply that anybody's race in here is easy and get over it. That is not what I'm saying. But I am saying that if we would go to Jesus, if we would find our strength in Him, we would find our rest in Him. Okay, and not only that, but we are commanded to take time off from our labor. I used to work with a guy, and he said, "Brennan, there's two kinds of people in the world. Those who pay for therapy and those who pay for vacations. I'm paying for vacations." So, okay, that's good advice. You know, we are not commanded to take time off from being a Christian. And I think that's where we often get it wrong. See, when you view your relationship with God as work, then you're just waiting to clock out. You show up to church, you clock in, but then we clock out sometimes even before the last worship song is over. We clock out and we head to the restaurants, we head to wherever. And I am not beating up on anybody who sneaks out of here. I have kids. I know sometimes the numbers flash over there and you got to get over there and find out what's going on. I'm just saying that when we view church, when we view our relationship with God as a burden, then we want to show up as late as possible. We want to do as little as possible, and we want to get out of here as soon as possible. We want to check the box and say, okay, I worked today. I've clocked in. It's time to clock out. See, the deeper problem with our rest is not a matter of scheduling it. It's not a matter of just carving out time to find some rest. It's a matter of our trust in God. So for some people in here, the thought of sitting still would absolutely drive you mad. I can't not work. I can't not be doing something. I can't be still. I can't find rest in Him. There's work to be done. You know, early bird gets the worm. I am one of those people. I mean, I can sit still, I can read a book, and I can learn. But if I cannot stand the thought of me not feeling like I am productive. See, but there's a reason that Jesus extends this invitation to us. It's because just like this people He was speaking to then, we today need rest. We need rest. And the trouble with the people today is they try to find it in all the wrong things. A substance, a device, a partner, whatever it is, we try to find it in the wrong things. See, God today, He gives us, and we'll get into this a little bit later, we get more than just a Sabbath day's rest. We get this relationship with Jesus. See, God gave us Calvary rest, as Adrian Rogers puts it, through the death of Jesus and through the resurrection of Jesus, which is, as the Bible tells us, is the fulfillment of the Sabbath. Calvary rest is how we apply the commandments today. The covenant Sabbath, okay, the Sabbath in the Old Testament, that speaks of the finished work that God did when He created the universe. God rested from His work. The believer's rest today speaks to the finished work of redemption. We rest in Him because it's finished. Christ accomplished all that He set out to accomplish on Calvary. We don't have to labor because he has completed the labor for us as far as our salvation. The Israelites had the Sabbath for very specific reasons, okay? It says, for in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and he rested on the seventh. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. The Sabbath day, again, for the Israelites was tied back to creation, specifically the seventh day. God rested, and on this day you will rest and remember what I accomplished. Okay, so at one level, the Sabbath was a time to cease from our own work, to rest, but it would also seem to be an invitation from God to participate in his rest. So I am resting from my labor, and I am resting in the fact that, God, you are the creator of the universe. It's a reminder back to the garden, back to the way it was supposed to be when man had perfect fellowship with God, leaving the chaos of the world, removing themselves from that, removing themselves from the distraction, and to look forward to, God, you are going to make this right. God, you are going to make all things new again. So free from the labors of the world and resting in God's presence. That's the goal I want to try to accomplish this morning, is for us to realize today that we can find rest in relationship with him. Rest and work are inseparable. There's a relationship, there's a balance we need to find with them. They play into one another. In your outline, we're going to look at the harmony between the two of them. You know, what Jesus says about both our work and our rest. And the main passage this morning introduces us to this first concept. Matthew 11:28 says, come to me, all who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. The decision is yours. If you want to find rest in him, you can find it in him. And the work is as simple as going to him. Jesus doesn't say, hey, sit there and I'll bring rest to you. He says, no, come to me and I will give you rest. It takes little effort for us to find rest in him. But there is a work that needs to be done first. So number one in your outline, you need to work to enter rest. I get that from the creation account. Genesis 2:2 says, by the seventh day, God completed his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh from all his works which he had done. Hebrews 4:11 also tells us that therefore let us be diligent to enter that rest so that no one will fall through following the same example of disobedience. Diligent is not a passive adverb there, okay? It's intentional. It's active. It's you make rest. You create rest. You work at getting rest. There's a common phrase amongst professionals. You know, if you work in a world where work is the world, you know, it's I'll rest when I'm dead. I'll rest when I'm dead. I would like to submit to you all this morning that you can find rest now. You don't have to wait until you're dead to find rest. If you labor in Christ, you can find peace, you can find rejuvenation by doing what you were made to do, by sourcing your strength through somebody far greater than you ever thought about. But a portion of that, again, is up to you. A portion of that is up to you. You have to be willing to go to him. You know, work feels good. Work feels like an accomplishment, and it was meant to. You know, you feel like you've succeeded in the day if you have worked hard and you've accomplished something, because work is good for you. Some of the teenagers in here that have discovered weightlifting, you know, like, whoa, this is awesome. Let's go get protein shakes. I don't know what they say, okay? But work is good. They're like, oh, this is awesome. When I work out, I get results, and you get them way more then than you do now, that's for sure. Work is a good thing, is a fulfilling thing, but it is not what saves you. It is not what saves you. So we get so much self-gratification from people praising us, from people looking at how hard we work, by feeling accomplished. So it's what grabs our attention, and it's what we invest all of our time in. And we are worn out. We are so worn out that church has become a burden to people. Like, oh, I've got to get up early in the morning. Number two in your outline, you were made to work more than you rest. I don't think there's any doubt about that. You were made to work more than you rest. we would atrophy away if all we did was sit down on the couch and not do anything, okay? You were made to work more than you rest. When we look at creation, we see that mankind was put in the garden to keep it, to work it, to cultivate it, to keep it. It's a good thing to work. God perfectly put us in the garden with free from sin and gave us a task. It's a good thing. But there's an important distinction that needs to be made. Those instructions in Genesis 2:15 come before the fall, before Adam and Eve sinned. So their work was good and it was different. It wasn't taxing because they were free from sin at this time. Since then, part of punishment from the fall is the difficulties of labor. That's both for what it means to women and what it means to men. That was part of the punishment, was our labor is now going to cost us something. You know, we look at God and we see that he formed the world in 6 days out of 7. He worked more than he rested. Then mankind was formed, given responsibility, and the purpose in which they were given required effort. Then man sinned, created a new problem, which is exhaustion. Exhaustion. So God then gave man the Sabbath. He's giving us rest. Mark 2:27 says this, Jesus says this, the Sabbath was made for man, not the man for the Sabbath. Don't get that backwards. Okay, our society today tries to make this work in inverse. I'm going to do as little as possible and then I'll live off of whatever you'll provide for me. That's not the biblical model. It's work and be diligent to find rest. Work and be diligent to find rest. Number 3 in your outline, God instructs you to earn your rest. Exodus 23:12. He says, 6 days you are to do your work, but on the 7th day you shall cease from labor so that your ox and your donkey may rest. And the son of your female slave as well as your stranger may refresh themselves. You and all you are responsible for should find rest. That's an important part of this verse. Because if you're not finding rest for yourself, you can't find rest for the people you're responsible for. That's convicting. That makes me examine my life and like, you know, I may be able to do this. I may be able to deceive myself and think like I can keep pushing this pace, which I have done numerous times in my life, deceived myself and be like, oh, you'll make it. But think about how great people will think you are because of how hard you work. Like that was my problem. But my family couldn't make it. All that I was responsible for couldn't make it, and nor should they have to. That's part of my story, is that self-dialogue and that self-conviction, right? Again, covenant rest. You need to find rest. This was the model that God's people were supposed to follow. It serves as a reminder to them, their creator. You better find some rest. You better find some rest. Because, I don't know about you all, but you know, my friends used to make fun of me because like after 12 o'clock when I get cranky and tired, they're like, this is tired, Brennan. And I start making terrible decisions. And I don't mean like immoral decisions. I just mean like, what are you doing, dude? You know, do you not have a brain? Like the more exhausted we are, the stupider we are. You need rest. You need rest. Remember, the Sabbath is pointing to God, but it's also pointing to something else. Colossians 2:16 says, therefore no one is to act as your judge in regard to food or drink or in respect to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath day. Again, the Sabbath is not what saves you. Christ is what saves you. Christ's work is what you find rest in. Not, you don't rest and be like, oh, well, look at everything I've accomplished. I'm good, I'm holy, I'm perfect. No. It's since Christ has died, since the work is completed now, nobody gets to hold the Sabbath over your head and say, if you don't follow this thing, you are not saved. Nobody gets to hold any of that stuff over your head. Because all that stuff was doing is pointing to this in verse 17. Things which are mere shadows of what is to come, but the substance belongs to Christ. The thing that was about to arrive in the Old Testament, the thing that was about to show up, It was so great that it has cast a shadow on all eternity. The shadow of the cross is not, we don't only live in it today, they were living in it back then. The Sabbath was pointing to the eventual completion of rest found in him alone. Matthew 12:8 says this, Jesus says this, for the Son of Man is the Lord of the Sabbath. That should be really eye-opening to us. Because when Jesus got here, people didn't really recognize him. But the Israelites, the Jewish people of that time, everything they were reading about him or in the word was pointing to him, and they missed it. They missed it. We can miss it too. Like if God's chosen people can miss it, we can miss it. The feast, the traditions, the liturgy, right? It was pointing to something. Don't think that the power is in the things. It's not. It's only in Jesus. And that's why rest is so crucial for us, because it removes you from the chaos of everyday life to where you can reflect on these things. Like, hey, why am I really doing this? Why am I really here at church this morning? For some of you, it's because I got hit over the head this morning and pulled out of bed by somebody. For others, it's because I want to meet Jesus this morning. I want to see him. I want to find rest in him. I want to start my week off in him. One of my favorite quotes is by a guy named Rich Mullins, which I didn't know who he was. Apparently he's a gospel singer, okay? But he said something really cool. He says, the problem with life is that it is so daily. The problem with life is that it is so daily. It just keeps happening. It just keeps happening. And it erodes you. And if you don't remove yourself from that, if you don't diligently find rest, you're going to be worn down to a nub. There's going to be nothing left of you to give to him. So you better find rest. You need rest because life is relentless. If all you do is nothing, you'll miss it. If all you do is work, you will miss it. You will miss at what this stuff is actually trying to point to, which is the work that Christ did for us on the cross. And let me be very clear, rest is not doing nothing. It's recharging. It's recharging for the 6 days ahead. Like I am here today trying to rest in his presence so that I'm ready for what's about to happen to me this week. And that's how you should enter into the building. God, what do you have to teach me? God, what are you preparing in me for this week? So what we see there is number 4, resting makes you work better. Resting makes you work better. Adrian Rogers said this too. He said, a man who is splitting wood doesn't waste time when sharpening his axe. A man who is splitting wood does not waste time when sharpening his axe. It makes him more efficient at his work. We look at it as, oh, he's not making any progress. He's just sitting there sharpening his axe. No, he's getting ready. You are not a robot. You need rest. And rest makes your work far more efficient. We have a model of this in Jesus. John 4, right here, we see the woman at the well, right? But something cool here is what it took for that interaction to happen. John 4:6 says, and Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, being wearied from his journey, was sitting thus by the well, and it was about the 6th hour. Jesus was resting. Jesus was taking a break. He'd probably been walking all day. He was walking from Samaria from Judea to get to Galilee. He'd probably spent all morning walking. He reached his physical limit and he knew, I got to rest. I've got to rest. He needed a moment to sit down, to get a drink of water with no distractions. And because he rested, he was able to, obviously he's Jesus. Okay, I get it, that was a divine encounter, a divine appointment, as you want to say. But the point is, the lesson there is that if Jesus needed to rest, you need to rest. And because Jesus was resting, a whole town was saved because of it. A whole town was saved because of it. There are physical limitations that we have. There are psychological limitations that we have, but there are also benefits physically and psychologically that we experience if we rest. I mean, doctors have to rest after surgery, right? There's rest for a reason. The best part of this example, Jesus resting, is that it resulted in Jesus meeting this woman at the well, and again, the whole town being saved. That's our example. We celebrate the first day of the week as the Lord's Day. Okay, the Sabbath has been conquered through Jesus. And we'll get into that in just a little bit. But Sunday, the first day of the week, is the Lord's Day. Okay, and here's why. Because it was Sunday when Jesus rose from the dead. It was Sundays when the disciples were commissioned to preach the gospel. It was Sunday when the Holy Spirit was imparted to them. It was Sunday when the church was born. It was Sunday when they met for worship and took their offerings. And it's also in Revelation, this is cool, when the book of Revelation was given to John on Sunday. So that it's when the early church used to be. So there is a long-standing tradition of us meeting on Sundays. Okay, it's the Lord's Day. It's a day of love, not a day of legalism. Okay, we should use our Sundays to love God in the same way that our church fathers used to love God with, in the same way that we have this biblical model of meeting on Sundays. Sundays are not the Sabbath. They're the Lord's Day. Here's some really good advice that I found while studying for this. I loved it so much that I felt like I needed to share it with you, okay? You would be a fool to not treat today, Sunday, this way. You make it a holy day. You commit to worship. You make church attendance exciting for the whole family. You make church attendance exciting for the whole family. You make it a holy day. Men, as leaders of the household, this is our responsibility. And that should be convicting because a lot of us, and even for me, sometimes it was our wives like, get up, lazy. Get up, we're going to church. That's not anytime recently, okay? I get here like 6:30. I'm so excited. I'm just kidding. You make it a healthy day. You make it a healthy day. You slow down. You know, what we realize, if we slow down on Sundays, you will get more done in the 6 days. You know, if you learn to rest on this day. Slow down. Make it a healthy day. And then make it a happy day. Like, every day for us should be a day of gladness, not of gloom because we have to wake up a little bit early. It should be a day of gladness. We are entering into the Lord's house. It doesn't just happen. You don't just walk in one day and magically like, oh, I love being here. Oh, this place is awesome. It takes a little work. All good things do. All good things do. You realize real quick, it's a two-way street. You may be a guest in here and feel like nobody sees you, nobody knows you, and maybe, I mean, there's a lot of people in here, but it's a two-way street. Go seek somebody out. Go make a friend with them. Members here, go find them. Build relationships with them. You know, it's an intentional thing, but it's a happy day. We look forward to those encounters, not dread them, okay? And that's how, when we do this as men, when we lead our families this way, that's how you pass the gospel on from generation to generation. We're getting up and going to church on Sunday, not because it's what we've always done, but because it's something we get to do to celebrate our Lord. And then what you find is that over time, this stuff is so rewarding. When we're serving Him, it is so rewarding. Number 5, here's one of the rewards. Working in Jesus allows you to rest. 1 Corinthians 15:10, by the grace of God, I am what I am, and His grace toward me did not prove vain, but I labored even more than all of them, yet not I, but the grace of God with me. I thought I was working this whole time, but if I was being honest and I look back at it, I would say, Jesus, I was resting in you. You were accomplishing a work through me. It isn't by your strength, it's by His strength. That's where the rest comes from, His strength. Colossians 1:29 says, for this purpose also I labor, striving according to His power, which mightily works within me. It's not burdensome to me to serve Jesus. As a matter of fact, it's life. It's rewarding. It is restful. It's still difficult. It's still hard, but it is rewarding. And if I could characterize it anyway, it would be it's worth it. It is worth it. You know, it's wrong for us to sit in here and to assume that in my strength, I am improving. My flesh is my flesh. You know, what does improve is my willingness to let the Spirit lead me and to let him guide my hand in his labor. That's what does improve. But my flesh is my flesh. It does not get any better. But my trust and my faith and my strength in him does. You know, we work with greater productivity and with a sense of freedom, knowing that God's pleasure is in my work as long as I'm doing it unto him. As long as I am working in him, God takes pleasure in what I'm doing. That's restful. That's freedom. That's peace. Knowing that the God of the universe takes pleasure in what I'm doing for him. Rest should be productive. And we see that in prayer. Prayer is resting in his presence, learning and conversing with him making us more like him. It allows us to step away from the craziness of the day to be recharged by the source of all life. It's productive because it enables us to be encouraged and prepared for the life that's about to take place. That's what prayer is. Here's the problem, though. I hear about the burnout problem all the time. All the time. Like, Brennan, yeah, I hear you. You're making some sort of sense up there. I get that it's supposed to be restful in him, but why are so many people burning out? Why are so many people exhausted? Like, what is taking place in our life that is causing God's people to lose heart? If I've learned anything, it's that in these equations, Jesus is never the problem. Jesus is never the problem. We don't burn out because he's not able to supply us with enough strength. We don't burn out because Jesus is letting us down. We burn out because we are trying to labor in our own strength. I am not up here telling you not to work. I've told you should work more than you rest. I am telling you that there is a relationship between rest and work, and there is a relationship between work and Jesus and rest in Jesus. So that's what this next section of the outline's about here. The relationship between work and Jesus. We are described as workers in the kingdom. Okay, Matthew 9:37, then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. Meaning if you're on his team, if you're a part of the kingdom, you are a worker. You are a worker. But I love the honesty here too. We're not only workers, but it seems like there are far fewer workers than we would imagine. Right? Which means we have fewer people doing a majority of the work. No wonder we're so exhausted, because nobody else is working. We're the only one working, right? We're to model the soldier, the athlete, and the farmer who all work for the end goal, who all work for the righteous cause. We also see this in Jesus while he was here. He was a worker. There was a job to do, and he would do it. John 5:17 says, my Father is working until now, and I myself am working. Jesus was a worker. Jesus specifically had a job to do, and a job that I could not do, and a job that I should not do. We're kind of starting to get the clues here. That was Jesus, that was his work. Jesus was the only person who could accomplish what he could accomplish. I need to quit doing other people's work. I need to be focused on my relationship with God and put my hand to the plow in the lane in which he sets me. It's not my job to do other people's work. Your job in the kingdom is significant, but it is relative to you. Trust me, you don't want me up here. I know I'm wearing a suit right now, but you don't want me singing with the suits. It would be awful. That's where all the pastors get together and they sing up here. Rich, where's my invite? I'm just kidding. He did invite me. He did invite me. He did. Okay. You don't want me doing that because that's not my job. It is not my job. It is not my giftedness, even though he's got auto-tune and all the cool stuff, okay? It is not my job. Jesus had a job. He completed the task. How do you know that? John 19:30, he said, "It is finished." And he bowed his head and he gave up his spirit. Nobody ended his life short. Nobody robbed him of his purpose. He laid it down. He bowed, he gave up his spirit. His work on earth was done. No one kept him from doing the exact thing that God had tasked him with. Right? If he was working, then we should also be working. If he was doing specifically what God called him to do, we should be finding out what God has called us to do. Not to earn anything, but as imitators of him. Hebrews 12 tells us now that Jesus is sitting down at the throne of God. He's sitting down. Why is he sitting? Because his job is done for now. He completed the task. You are perfectly capable of accomplishing all that God wants you to accomplish. Perfectly capable of it. He's not the problem when we burn out. We are commissioned now to carry the gospel. Carry the gospel to the ends of the earth because we're workers. And not only that, because there is, number 2 in your outline there is kingdom work to be done. 1 Timothy 4:10 says, For it is for this we labor and strive, because we have fixed our hope on the living God, who is the Savior of all men, especially of believers. Colossians 1:10 says, so that you will walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, to please him in all respects, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God. There is a work to be done. We are laborers. Okay, but no matter how hard we work, we will not see the fruit we hope to achieve if we are not finding our strength in him. Like the fruit that we desire to create is made by the Holy Spirit only. Not through our own deeds, not through our works, not through our actions. That's why it's our benefit to rest in the Spirit. Because when we're resting in him, we get to watch him work in our lives. Yes, there's a work to be done. Yes, there's a task to be accomplished, but there is a right way to accomplish that work. So why do we burn out? Well, number 3, God's kingdom purpose for you is not burdensome. God's purpose for you is not to burn out. God's purpose for you is not to take a break from being a Christian. Judges 13:5, for behold, you shall conceive and give a birth to a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the boy shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb. This passage is talking about Samson. Samson had a mighty purpose in God. Samson had something pretty great to accomplish. He was to deliver his people from the hands of the Philistines. Like Samson's purpose was a difficult one, even a dangerous one. But if he would stay in God's command for his life, he would have been more than able. He would have been able to accomplish it and accomplish it well. But we look at Samson and we make the mistake of assuming that his hair was the source of his strength. It wasn't. It was a representation of his strength. So we look at Samson and we say, well, yeah, of course he's going to accomplish that. Look how strong he is. Look at all the things he has. And we do the same thing with our peers. Look, of course they're making it. Look at how they've got the perfect family. They had both their parents. They were loved to death. No, God has a purpose for you, and God is going to provide you the strength. Just like God provided the strength for Samson. Don't miss it in the story and think that Samson's hair was the source of his strength. It was not. You know, we see proof of that by the end of his story when all of his hair is gone and he was able to pull the columns down and kill the Philistines. And I know this story so well because I don't know if you were here a few Wednesdays or not, but Rocky told us this story of Samson. It was so amazing. Right, his life ended tragically. He had abandoned God and he had pursued other people's purpose in his life. You know, he was supposed to be a Nazarite. He was supposed to be set apart. He was supposed to walk in obedience. And if you look at his life, he just kept making mistake after mistake after mistake. Cut his hair. He killed the Philistines with a donkey's jaw. A Nazarite wasn't supposed to touch dead things because at the risk of them being left unclean. Just mistake. He was supposed to abstain from strong drink. He just kept trying to find his purpose in other people. If you love Jesus, your labor in approval and acceptance and finding your salvation is over. You don't have to labor in that anymore if you love Jesus. The fourth commandment is the only commandment not repeated in the New Testament. That's a crazy stat. I don't know if it's a stat, but that's a crazy fact. The fourth commandment is the only commandment not repeated in the New Testament because Jesus fulfilled the work of the Sabbath. And now we meet on Sundays so that we might remember that. Not because it's the Sabbath, but because it's the Lord's day. This is your day when we get to look back at all the things you accomplished on the cross. Samson was supposed to be set apart, a Nazirite. That's what that means. We are God's people now. We are supposed to be set apart, pursuing him. Instead, we see so many people getting all these things that we want and thinking that it's the source of their strength. And so we are pursuing worldly things as opposed to godly things. That's not God's plan for you. That is not God's plan for you. Number 4 in your outline, other people's purpose for you is burdensome. If Samson would have pursued God, he would have accomplished his purpose in a much better fashion. Okay, but because he was pursuing other things, he wasn't going to make it. Acts 5:29 says we must obey God rather than men. We must obey God rather than men. This is Peter speaking to the religious leaders of the time. That's just the most concise way I know how to put it. And they're telling them, you need to quit talking about the gospel. You need to quit sharing about Jesus. And Peter said, no, I'm not listening to you all. Even though what you're telling me to do is easier and it may not cost me my life, there's no way I can listen to you all because what you're commanding me to do is far more burdensome than if I was to obey God right now. Peter knew that the only way he was going to make it is by doing the things that Jesus first commanded him to do. You know, Peter, I don't want to imply that we're not listening to wise counsel. We don't listen to people. Okay, the issue that Peter is dealing with is very black and white. Jesus gave him a direct command to carry the gospel, to go and to teach, to baptize, like that. Those were clear instructions. And there are things in our life which are pretty black and white. But we're like, man, it's so much easier if I just go with the culture on this one. It's so much easier if I just don't stick my neck out here and be a Christian. Peter was like, no, it would be far more burdensome to me and my soul to take the easy way out. The yoke of not obeying Jesus would be so great that the option was never considered for him. It's like, I'm not putting that yoke around my neck of obeying you as opposed to obeying God. You know, even if you're in here and you're just going with the crowd, the culture's weighing down on you, you are not living in freedom. Your burden is heavy. It never satisfies. You need more and more and more to get the same result. And I'm about to get personal, but there's no greater picture than caffeine. You know? And I'm getting personal to myself. Just trying to be honest. But it never satisfies. It's like, look how hard I can work. Yeah, because you're running on 1,200 milligrams of caffeine. No wonder. See, we start sourcing our strength from all these other things and we fool ourselves and we think, look how good I'm doing. You're going to crash and burn is what's going to happen. That's why the Bible tells us not to be yoked with unbelievers, because they distort your purpose in the same way they distorted Samson's purpose. Jesus said, hey, in this world you will have trouble. Hey, life is going to be very, very difficult. But the life I made you for is not burdensome to you. So number 5, we see that kingdom work is difficult. It's really difficult. 1 Peter 5:10 says, after you have suffered for a little while. Oh, how encouraging. The God of all grace, who called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself perfect, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. You're going to make it. No matter what happens. If you are doing it in him, no matter what happens, you're going to make it. You are going to make it. Jesus had problems when he was on this earth. Matthew 4:13, this verse right here is Jesus going and resting, find a solitary place because he just heard the news about his cousin being beheaded. Troubles. He had grief. It wasn't going to deter him from seeking out his purpose, from accomplishing his purpose. The reason we have rest, the reason we need rest, the reason Jesus needed rest is because life is difficult. It is extremely difficult. Grant taught me something one time. I was kind of distracted. Maybe I was complaining, given his response. I probably was, okay? He said, hey, Brennan, everybody has different size plates. Everybody has different size plates. And what that meant was, just because you look at their life and you don't think they're busy doesn't mean that they're not busy and doesn't mean that life is not hard. That is not what I am sitting up here and telling you. I'm telling you quite the opposite. It is very difficult. But again, when you do it in him, when your life is a life in pursuit of him, it's worth it. No matter how difficult it is. Because you know where your strength is coming from. You know, I've learned that some of my perceived strength was actually sourced from a character flaw. You know, I thought I was good. No, Brennan, Jesus is trying to teach you something about yourself. And it's only painful to let go of it because that's where your flesh is alive. Where there's no pain, you're already dead. And we are called to die to ourselves daily. So yeah, it's painful. Yeah, it's hard. That's the point. God is revealing to you where your flesh might still be alive. As I have matured, as God has revealed more to me, I see that's where I was not relying on him. And it's painful. It is very, very painful. He does this because he loves us, because he doesn't want to leave us the way that we are. When we burn out, we do it on our own. Let me tell you something. Hang in there, lean into him. His way for you is not cumbersome. It's not weighty. It's life. It's life. So let's look at the relationship between rest and Jesus, because that's the work we're supposed to do in him. What rest are we supposed to find in him? First thing we see is that Christians should rest as Jesus rested. Mark 4:38 said, Jesus himself was in the stern asleep on the cushion, and they woke him and said to him, Teacher, do you not care that we're perishing? Silly question, right? That's how we act. Do you not care that I'm working myself to death down here? Jesus, do you not see this storm that I'm in right now? Yeah, he's in the boat with you. If you are in him. It's a silly question. It's an absolutely silly question. The Bible tells us to cast all of our worries on him because he cares for us. As a matter of fact, he cares more about our lives than we do. Because he loves far better than I could ever love. He cares for me far deeper than I could ever care. He loves us. I have a painting of this story, Matthew 4, verses 35 through 38. I have a painting of it in my office because I'm really fancy and I'm into really not fine artworks. Just kidding. It's like it's there, but it's like something I got off Amazon for like $10, okay? And my daughter was in my office and she was looking at it and she was like, Brennan, what's that? What is that picture of? I said, oh, Ella, this is going to be a great teaching moment. It's like, I get to be a dad right now. And so we got the Bible out and I started reading it to her. And, she just wanted me to tell her what the picture was about. She didn't want me reading a book. Okay, so we're reading the story. I'm telling her about it. And I'm making her repeat the parts to me. And I'm trying to see if she remembers it. And we get to the end. Mark verse 40. Mark 4, verse 40, and it says that Jesus said to them, why are you afraid? How is it that you have no faith? Why are you guys afraid? Do you not know that I'm in the boat with you? Yeah, I get that there's a storm going on right now, but I am with you. Why are you afraid? So we get to that point. Jesus calms the storm, and I'm making her tell me these parts, like, okay, and Jesus said this to the storm, and then what happened? She said the waves went away. I said, great. And then I said, what did Jesus say to the disciples at the part where you're supposed to say, ye of little faith? She goes, you're welcome. I said, no, that's not what she said to the disciples. But I am telling you this. I am telling you something. While Jesus didn't tell the disciples, you're welcome, there's a lot of truth to that story and to what Ella said. The storm might seem unbearable, but he is immovable. If you lean into him, you are his. No matter what the storm does, whether it subsides or whether it takes you under, Jesus is going to be on the other side of it saying, you're welcome. Either the storm is going to go away, or if you are his, you are going to be with him. And you get to say, or he gets to say to you, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for the cross. Thank you for the rest, knowing that my Father in heaven cares about me. Jesus didn't step away from the crowds every now and again. It was a habit. It was something he did regularly. He didn't wait to be at the end of his rope. He didn't wait until he was about to be burnt out. He made a habit of finding rest in God. He did it often. It was a part of his daily routine to go and seek God out first so that he would be prepared for what the day had for him. In an even greater scale, that's what Sundays are for us. It's not the weekend. It's the start of the week. It's the first day of the week to encourage us to go out and to do the Lord's work. Find rest today because work needs to happen. In my early 20s, I would work. And then eventually about once a year, I would get what women characterize as the man flu. You know, we're inconsolable. I would work myself to death. I finally realized your body is crashing. Your body is saying you are at the end of your rope. And so I'd miss out on a whole week of work because I would never stop working. Unfortunately, this was in a spiritual and physical sense. I was plagued with discontentment, working to impress and exhausted. Because for people to like me, I better be entertaining, I better be funny, I better be working hard because they're not going to be impressed if they really know me. And this carried over into my relationship with God. Remember, I thought I was strong. I realize now it was a character flaw. It's number 2 in your outlines there in that third section. Christians are not only laborers, they are members of the kingdom. And I didn't understand that I was a member of the kingdom. Colossians 1, 12 through 13, you can read it, it's there. It talks about how we now have this inheritance into the kingdom because of Jesus. That's the rest we can experience in him. Psalms 46:10 says, cease striving and know that I am God. It's not get to work to get in. It's find rest in him and then let's get to work. Not, hey, you better work really hard so you can make it one day. No, not at all. I think most of us in here know the story about Mary and Martha. Okay, that's Luke 10, 38 through 42. You can write that down. You can read the story later. But see, what was happening is Martha brought Jesus into her house, brought him into her house, and Martha was distracted because Martha was working. Martha was preparing. And I'll be quite honest with you. For a long time, I didn't understand this passage. Because Martha's doing the right thing here. Martha's working. Martha's trying to make Jesus' experience in her house enjoyable, right? Verse 41 says, but the Lord answered to her and said, Martha, Martha, you are worried and bothered about so many things. But only one thing is necessary. For Mary had chosen the good part, which shall not be taken away from her. She was sitting at Jesus' feet and learning from him. She was resting in who Jesus was. I wonder how many people in here this morning are choosing that good portion, the good part, the part that can't be taken away. Those deviled eggs that she was making, those are gone now, okay? But the lessons that Mary was able to learn from Jesus, those things can never be taken away from her. Yes, we can acquire things. Yes, we can build businesses. Yes, we can really impress people. But at the end of the day, what is all that stuff worth? It's not. Let me tell you something. Fundamentally, at its very core, our rest in God is affected by our trust in God. Do I trust him enough to take care of my life? The Bible tells us over and over and over, God cares for you. Not because you're great and not because you're the best worker he's ever seen, but because he is good and he loves you. That's why he loves you, because he is good. Number 3, Christians know God as Father, not as God an employer. He's not, he is your boss, but it's not like he is paying you. Your relationship with him is not transactional. Like if you're struggling with Sabbath rest, it might be a gospel issue in your life because you're trying to find your identity in your work or being a people pleaser. And you're using busyness to distract you from your unhappiness. So much overwork is driven by self-justification. We need to accomplish more and more because we're failing to apply our hearts to what Christ has already accomplished for us. So the most important thing to do during rest is to refresh your heart with fellowship with God. That's the most important thing you can do. To enjoy your status as his beloved child because of what Jesus has done. It's not an exchange of goods. It's not a transaction. He's not rewarding you for your good efforts. It's because somebody paid a price for you that you couldn't afford to pay. The gospel is God did this for you. You can never pay him back. You don't deserve this. God did this for you. That's what you're resting in. Knowing him as Lord and resting in him as Savior eternally. Number 4, eternal rest is a reward for Christians. Revelations 4:13 says, "Blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. Yes, says the Spirit, so that they may rest from their labors, for their deeds follow with them." There is a relationship between rest and labor. There's a relationship between rest and the deeds that you're doing now. In contrast to this, the punishment in just a few verses before this is the exact opposite for eternity. Revelations 14:11 says, "For their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest day and night." A few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I don't know, time flies, I did a 2-part message about imitating Christ. It did nothing short of change my life. Like it really did. It was based off of Ephesians 5:1, where it says, "Therefore be imitators of God as beloved children." And when I was preparing for it, I felt like I can handle that first part. I can handle that imitators of God stuff. But that last part, the more I prepared, the more difficult it became. What does that mean? Children of beloved children. What does that mean? I understand it better today because of my children. And what I mean by that is, thunderstorms at our house, they're not fun. Okay, they used to be so relaxing and I could sleep and they were awesome, but they are not fun anymore because of my 2 little children. It turns into them trying to join you in your bed or you giving in and going to their bed, and it's miserable. I'm sorry, this isn't therapy for me. It's just telling you what has happened, okay? And it never made sense to me because, the beloved child part, How do I change the thunderstorm at all? I can't calm the sea. I can't make the thunder stop. I can't make the lightning cease. But what I learned is that my daughter can rest, my son can rest, not because the situation has changed, but because the relationship and the rest they can find in knowing that their dad cares about them. That even though this is loud, this is distracting, my dad will take care of me, my mom will take care of me. That's the beloved child. And again, she could rest easy knowing that no matter what happened to her, I was there, miserable, drooling, but happy. Happy that I could protect. Happy that I could see her through to the other side of that storm. Like, you want to find rest? View yourself as a beloved child in his kingdom. Not as a laborer, not as somebody who has character flaws and needs to earn everything, but as a beloved child.
So in my hand, I got another microphone. Hey. No, come on. You need to come sing this last song with us. We got auto-tune.